All right, we're about a minute away from getting started. We have a poll here that I'm going to launch a Did You Know poll. So as people are joining, we'll get some feedback, see what people know, what they've heard of before, and then we'll get going in about a minute.
Good. Just put a do not disturb sign on my door.
All right, for those of you that are just joining, please take a minute and fill out the poll. 2 quick yes, no answers. Just want to get a sense of whether folks have heard of these 2 organizations before as we go through, and I'll introduce everybody as we get going here. All right, since we like to reward those that are on time, we are going to we're going to get going. We're going to get started. I'm excited about our webinar, our training session. Today we have a special guest joining. For those that have been to our webinar sessions before, you will recognize Jermaine, myself. We do these webinars on a monthly basis, usually about the 3rd Wednesday of every month. Every once in a while it gets moved around. Our goal is to provide about 30 minutes of content, training, education, and then take questions. Sometimes we go a little bit longer. This webinar, we might, since it's a lot more about kind of questions and Q&A type of stuff, we'll probably go a little bit longer than half an hour. Our topic today is how they attack. And it's all about real stories from the front lines on the fight against cybersecurity and the fraud that is related to cybersecurity. And I am super excited to introduce our new friend, Detective David Coffey from the Toronto Police Services. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much. I'm equally excited to be here.
Awesome, and we're excited that so David's joining us from Niagara Falls, where he's actually at a fraud workshop right now. And to give everybody a little bit of background, David's a detective for the Toronto Police Services, specializing in financial crimes. He's led major fraud investigations, including Project Hydra, which resulted in arrests and the 2021 Investigative Partnership Award. And with over 2 decades of investigative experience, Detective Coffey has held roles in criminal investigative units, fraud offices, and the intelligence unit. He's extensively trained in financial crimes, domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and firearms investigation. And he's very passionate about public education. We're super happy, excited that Detective Coffey is taking a break from the conference he's at, and he's joining us today. So welcome. And then, of course, Jermaine Clark, who's our VP of Operations, who joins myself on a regular basis when we do these webinars. Welcome, Jermaine.
Still here. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So if we look, gentlemen, if we look at our poll, we have slightly more than, we have 55% of people have not heard of the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, but 45% have. And about 70% have not heard of Cybersecure Canada, which is interesting. I thought it might be.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be opposite, but there you go, right? The poll speaks.
Yeah. All right, so before we get into it, let's just talk about our next webinar. So we're moving into a discussion next month about AI, automation. The robots are coming, and we're having a lot of conversations with clients these days about how to prepare their business for this kind of wave of AI and the opportunities to automate a lot of parts in our business. So if you're interested in data, AI, automation, using bots, figuring out how to better support your teams, provide better service, that sort of stuff with the help of AI, that will be a good training session for you. It's on June the 14th at 1 p.m. You can go to our website or just hit the QR code there in order to register. Okay, so let's zoom out for a sec. So we're gonna get into some stories. Detective Coffee is gonna tell us some stories from what he's seeing, but we'll zoom out for a minute. And we wanted to we went to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, and looked at some of their stats. So in 2022, they reported a record $530 million in fraud and cybercrime losses, which was a 40% increase from the previous year. So the scope of the problem is getting bigger and bigger. However, there's this issue, and part of the reason we asked the question, the poll question, there's an issue about reporting and people sharing. Only 5 to 10% of people estimated to report actually did. So they're reporting 530 million in losses. There's potentially 10 times, 20 times that number of actual losses happening out there, which is just gives me, and I think gives us, a bit of a sense of what's happening in the world of cybercrime and the amount of money actually involved.
Yeah, and then if you kind of think through a little bit more, and you're like, well, hey, what are the kind of top 2 or 3 things that you'd find that in the statistics that are saying, well, how are you being scammed? How were you scammed in 2022? What type of fraud, what type of cybersecurity events did you have? And for myself, I was extremely surprised. Cryptocurrency, I understand that's a big one happening all the time. Spear phishing, email, whale phishing. We see this whaling email scams. We see these all the time. I was really, really surprised at the romance scams being number 3. Like, out of the top 3, people are being romantically scammed, and they're reporting these as the top 3 in 2022. So, not only is the internet a challenge and not safe, not only is your cryptocurrency a challenge and not safe, but now your dating scene is a problem. So everything's having a challenge right now. And from a statistics point of view, can you imagine, right, the amount of stuff that's being lost and the amount of revenue that's been given away by being exploited in these types of scams?
So, and then if you look at this this graph here, what's causing it obviously is a lot from the email side of things. And we brought this up in a previous webinar. I think we all know the criminals prey on user practices, gullibility, lack of training, and simple like exploits like weak passwords and stuff like that. We see that all over the place.
Even before coming into the webinar today, I got an email from someone that went to one of our old employees' emails, but from myself. And it's like, hey, I'm in trouble. Can you help me to buy some gift cards? And I was like, well, I didn't send that email, nor does that person work at our organization. So when you take a look at that, and you look at the space from the cybersecurity footprint perspective, you'll see, and you'll hear a lot from Detective Coffees, that stuff that comes out of this is people are being scammed at every level, and it is broad and it's indiscriminate, and it doesn't matter where you're at. And a lot of us, and the people that are on this webinar today, and the people that will look at this in the future, they fall all into that kind of top 4 category of they have to use emails. They've got challenges with people personally at the security level. They don't understand how they're being exploited. And then the training that follows with that. So, and then of course, there's all those people that use the same password for everything, which you've heard a ton about in our previous webinars. So I won't dive into that.
All right. So speaking of diving in, let's get into it. So it's time for the main event. No pressure, Detective. So we have Detective Coffee is going to tell us, and I'm just going to stop the screen share just so we can see a little bit better. Detective Coffee is going to tell us a little bit about some of the most common experiences that he's seeing out there. So maybe we could start with, there was a little bit of data there, but tell us, like, what are you seeing kind of every day? What are some examples of the kind of cybercrime type of stuff you're seeing out there on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so financial crimes at Toronto Police, we just revamped our entire unit. So every fraud reported in the city of Toronto now comes to us first. Okay, it's a centralized way of taking in those occurrences. Before it went out to the individual divisions based on where the reports were taking. So prior to, say, a month ago, we were unable to see the different frauds that were being reported because they weren't coming to us first. Now they are. So now we've got a first-hand view. I can look down the hall and I can see these guys answering phones and taking reports and calling victims and stuff. And I can walk down now and I can say, what are we seeing? And the first thing I'm seeing is fraud, in my view, is probably the #1 criminal report that the Toronto Police takes. Every day, on a daily basis, there are fraud reports being submitted, one after the other, which it makes sense because if we all look at our phone, how many times, almost a daily basis, we can look at our phone and say, yeah, that's a fraud. That's a fraud. That email is a fraud. That text is a fraud. We get inundated with it and we become numb to it. It only takes a second of vulnerability. It only takes a second of being tired or just not thinking and hitting that click, and boom, you've allowed those fraudsters into your contact list, into your phone, into your computer. So the reports that come into us are usually on the lower end because like frauds have been around since the dawn of time. They talk about the oldest profession. I would say the oldest profession is probably fraudster, because basically fraud is, in its essence, is theft. We have to remember that it's theft. So they're thieves. They're trying to steal your money. The definition of a fraud is theft with trickery. So they're trying to trick you into giving them your money. They're not reaching into your pocket. They want you to reach into your pocket and hand over the cash. So frauds are only limited by fraudsters' imaginations. Like it's unlimited what they will do. There's no depths to which they will not sink to steal your money, to steal your 95-year-old grandmother's money, to steal victims from money from Holocaust victims, saying we've recovered gold in Switzerland, that's yours. They're literally not, I'm never shocked by the depths of what they will sink to. And we see it every day.
Yeah, there's no conscience or anything, and it's just like
no. This is, I always tell people in presentations, this is their job. Their job, if they were to do a resume up, it would say fraudster. And their job from the second they wake up to the second they go to sleep at night is trying to figure out ways to steal your money. So like any criminals, there are smarter ones and there are not as smart ones. So on the lower end of sophistication, we have the people knocking on your door saying, hey, give me 10 grand and I'll fix your roof tomorrow. And we see more of those. So there's more quantity of those, and grandparent scam, more quantity. But the number of the dollar value is certainly highest at the higher level of sophistication, the smarter criminals, the people that you're fighting against with the phishing scams, the romance scams, the malware scams. Those are high. The reason those are the top 3 and 4 is not because they're the most numerous, it's because they're the most rewarding to them. They can get the most money that way.
And that sort of stuff can scale. And I'm kind of interested to hear about this romance scam thing, because I have, we see the crypto, like it'd be interesting to hear about the cryptocurrency stuff too. But like we see the ransomwares and the email account compromise and malware and stuff like that. But what's a romance scam?
So a romance scam, like any cybercrime, is through the internet. And essentially, It's a romance. So it's a relationship that a person believes they're having with somebody on the internet. These people, of course, always live across the ocean or in South America or far, far, far away. So the relationship is started on the internet and it continues through the internet, through emails, and all frauds all victims are vulnerable in some form. Every fraud, there's vulnerabilities that are exploited. Romance scams are people, and it could be a 25-year-old university student, or it could be a 65-year-old widower. They're lonely. They're looking for romance. It's hard to meet people anymore, so people go online. Internet dating is very, very common. So fraudsters know that, and they'll hook into these people and they'll say, oh, hey, I live over here and I live in the Philippines, or I live in Germany. I'm a soldier. I'm an American soldier in Germany. I'm looking for a pen pal because it's lonely over here. Inevitably, though, once they got the hooks into you, there's a request for money.
But is this like a few bucks here and there? Like,
well, it could start out that way. It could start out that way. But I was recently, like just this week, I'm doing a presentation at another group in a month, and somebody saw the attendance list. And somebody in the group sent me a message saying, I see you're coming to talk to us. Could you answer this question? So he recently discovered that his father had started a relationship, and in the quote it says, formed a relationship with a woman and her family. That was in the message he sent me. She lived in the Philippines. And the bigger hook to this one was, apparently this woman was an heiress to a large fortune. So there's always, like in the back of our head, we must always be thinking, this is crazy, this is crazy. And I'm sure this gentleman was thinking the same thing too. But you jump in, you fall for it. So what they asked him to do was, we're gonna inherit millions and millions of dollars. We don't have it yet. Can you kind of support us until we get the money? And then we'll give you double when we get the money. So there was a relationship hook. And then there was you're going to double your money hook. So that's a double romance scam. That's a double whammy.
So,
and over
so
the
it's a
course
little
of
bit of
5 years,
catfishing with a little bit of like internet fishing.
100%. Yeah. Right. And it doesn't need all those elements. It can just be the one. It could just be romance. It could, bring me home to you and buy my plane tickets, that kind of stuff. But this gentleman over 5 years has sent this woman who's likely not a woman, doesn't have a family in the Philippines, who the heck knows where they are in the world, $4 million.
$4 million.
$4 million. So this is a gentleman with money, clearly.
Wow.
That they've hooked into. And, the problem with romance scams is people don't believe it because they don't want to know. They don't want to know that they've been duped, and how hard and humiliating and how much shame, how much embarrassment would one feel if you've given $4 million to some fraudster in who knows in the world.
So that kind of touches a little bit on the kind of social impact of it. But what else are you guys seeing in kind of that impact on the personal level or at the business level when something like this happens?
Right. Well, on a social level, I remember when I was a teenager, our house was broken into. And so somebody was in our house rifling through our drawers, throwing stuff all over the floor, ripping boxes out and stuff like that. I equate it to that. I mean, there's a feeling of vulnerability because they've gotten into your life. That's a break-in, or they've gotten into your house. A fraud, they've gotten into your life. They may have gotten into your heart. They may have gotten into, however they've gotten into you. On a business standpoint, say if a secretary has been fooled by a spear phishing, by an email purportedly sent by her boss. I mean, how much shame and embarrassment is that you've now potentially cost your company, X amount of dollars, or you've allowed these fraudsters to get into your database. and steal all your data, which your information, which is even more valuable than money to these guys.
And so, like, we hear this all the time. We're out talking to businesses, and we deal in a small and mid-sized business world. I hear a lot from people saying, wow, we're just a small business. Like, there's no value in attacking us, or we're a small nonprofit, or that sort of thing. Is there a size of business or particular industry that's more vulnerable or less vulnerable that you're seeing and kind of day to day in these sort of attacks?
The simple answer is no. Each type of business has its own vulnerabilities. A larger business may be more vulnerable because the business is spread across, geographical area, Vancouver, Toronto, New York. So there's not a lot of personal contact. Everything's done through emails and electronically. So that's a vulnerability. Larger businesses, though, generally have better security in place. They have better protocols. They have better firewalls. So a smaller business, a business is a business. You still have access to likely hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, whether it be just from them hacking into your bank accounts or whether it's through your data that they want to steal. A smaller business may have less security, but they may be better off because they're all in one room, or they're all in one building, so they can see each other. The boss is right next door, kind of thing, not emailing from New York. So each size has its own vulnerabilities, and they're all targeted.
That makes sense. Now, the other thing we were talking about a bit before when we were doing kind of the prep for this was reporting. And you mentioned having your house broken into. I remember same thing when I was growing up. Our house got broken into, and my mom, and how kind of bothered she was emotionally about it. But then there was this feeling like people break into houses all the time. Is there any point in telling the police? And it sort of feels like nobody really breaks into houses anymore. And there's so much cybercrime that happens. Is there any point in telling the police? Is there any point in reporting it?
1,000% there is, especially from a police point of view. We need to know the attempts. We need to spot trends. It helps us to get the message out to companies such as whatever company was victimized. It gets it out to the community, to the public. Sometimes, not always, and I'd like to say it happens more, but oftentimes, especially when you're talking crypto, you're talking large amounts of money transfers, oftentimes, no, we're not getting the money back. But sometimes we can identify the perpetrators. We can put we can put tracers on it. We can put alerts out, kind of thing. So, and it helps. The Canadian Anti-Fraud Center that you mentioned earlier, they create statistics which gets the word out to the public. They're a Canadian agency, federal government. So reporting it is very, very important. And the quicker you report it, the more likelihood it is that we'll be able to recover some funds. We do recover funds.
Reporting is important, of course.
Yes.
I mean, but a lot of the reporting builds the foundation for what we can stop in the future, because it's a lot more challenging to stop it after it's occurred today. The bank transfers already happened. So it's particularly challenging to recover your losses. It isn't like, you can follow the guy with the pickup truck that just, emptied your garage out down the highway and catch up to him. They've already taken the money, the account has been cleaned, your credit card was already compromised, etc. So you're not really getting your money back today, but you're working towards, as you report it, it builds the database to ensure that in the future we can track this down, stop it, prevent it, create the education on the front end for people. So is that where the greater benefit comes out?
Exactly. 100%. That's the greatest benefit. A lot of times these guys use the same MO, so we can trace it back to certain groups. We know that it's a group out of this area that's doing this scam. We know this group because they'll use the same phone numbers or the same names or the same, pseudonyms type thing. So it is, spotting trends is really crucial to us to help prevent future crimes for sure. And like I said, the quicker you report it, the more likelihood it is that we may recover some. We had, it was unheard of until last month. An officer in my office was able to recover $90,000 from a cryptocurrency wallet. So this was an investment scam, cybercrime, investment scam. Multiple hundreds of thousands was lost, but he was able to get it quick enough, and at least he was able to recover $90,000. Although it was certainly not, I talked to him today, it was certainly not in multiple production orders. Our C3 unit at TPS, which is our coordinated cybercrime unit, they do our intelligent computer tracking and everything like that. General warrants, and then at the end of the day, though, the wallet that they had, that for whatever reason, the fraudster hadn't taken all the money out of it, so we were able to recover a significant portion. So that was a success. We do have success stories too. It's not all doom.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, and just to open it up, if anybody has any questions, please put them. I see there's a couple questions already in there. Put them in the Q&A panel, and we'll ask them to Detective Coffee if there's things on your mind, things you're wondering about. I was wondering, you talked about the bank account thing, because it's always amazing to me. Like, we've seen these frauds where somebody will hack an email, they'll change invoices, they'll change bank details, they'll email, hey, transfer to this bank account instead of where you would normally do. So a business will send $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 to these bank accounts. And frequently when you go back and you look at it, it's like TD Bank, or it's Royal Bank or Bank of Nova Scotia or stuff like that. And you just kind of sit here like, can't you trace that? Can't you figure out who those people are? They must have somehow opened that bank.
Right. So absolutely, we can trace it. And that's one of the benefits to cybercrime, is it's all traceable over the internet. If it goes to a bank account at a bank, what we need to do is because the bank just won't give us information on bank accounts without production orders. So legal documents, that it's like a search warrant for documents. But we can hold whatever money's there if the money's still there. It usually isn't. And we will get the history on that bank account. The holy grail to fraud is not these fraudsters getting money, it's getting information, which leads to identity theft. Identity theft is the holy grail of fraud, because if they steal your identity, they create synthetic bank accounts. So we'll trace that money to a bank account, and it'll say, yep, that bank account, once we've done a production order, that bank account belongs to John Doe. This is his address. This is his driver's license. But John Doe doesn't exist, and the money's already gone. Sometimes then we can get video of John Doe coming and taking money out of the bank account and stuff like that. So it leads us to avenues of investigation. But to answer your question, it'll lead us somewhere, but often it leads us to a dead end, especially if they're smart. If they're really good ones, that's what happens.
So if we start talking a little bit about prevention, what would you say is kind of the mindset that folks should have when they're looking at their email, and like, what kind of mindset, how trusting should we be?
Right. It's really, it's hard for me to say because I don't want people to be paranoid. However,
I think we're a little too late for that. We're a little too late for that. I'm really paranoid.
It might be a little paranoia is kind of good for you. Constant vigilance, constant doubt. Like when I got an email the other day, and it was legitimately from Bell, so my cell phone provider, and it was saying that, okay, you need to contact us because you missed a payment, because long story short, I just switched my phone over and blah, blah, blah. It's been paid. But when I look at it, and whenever I see someone saying, you need to click on this to pay us, I immediately delete.
Yeah.
But what I was able to do is I was able to go to the Bell website and go through it that way and verify. So it was legitimate, but delete.
Don't click any links in
It's-
emails. Don't
it's-
pay anything for via your email. Mark a
Don't
spam,
click.
then go log into your account.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
It's
Yeah,
interesting
I
you
mean,
tell
the
that.
easiest thing is don't click.
Yeah, it's interesting you tell that story because I got a phone call last weekend. And it said now, like I have a Rogers phone and now pops up saying likely spam or likely
Yeah.
fraud,
Yeah,
which is useful, right? But it was this organization that was saying your lease is up. We've been contacted by your car company to do an appraisal on your call. No idea whatsoever if it's legitimate or not, right? Like, because you're like, this is possible, like my lease is going up, but
Yeah.
no
but
idea.
fraud. I would just, that screams fraud. Anything like that. And it's safe to err on the side of caution. Like if I just deleted that and didn't look into it, I'm sure Bell would have got me somehow or how else. They would have called me. They would have done something. You can always find out. The best thing to do is ask questions. Never give information. Look for information. Take information, whether it be from the website or whether it be from a caller on the phone. Never give the information.
Okay. So if somebody calls me and they're like, "Oh, hey, your best friend's sick," I shouldn't go, "Oh my God, John is in the hospital.
No.
Is his right leg still attached?
Yeah.
Is his brown hair no longer combed?" I shouldn't give them all of that information when
Exactly.
they
We have briefly, I'll touch on like grandparent scam where they're calling these elderly people and saying their granddaughter is in. And afterwards, the victim is 100% sure they knew my grandson's name. They knew my grandson's name was Jonathan. But when you talk to them, by the end, they're like, "Oh, maybe I told them," because they say grandpa, and then you answer Jonathan, and then boom, they've got Jonathan, and now they know you've got a grandson. So it's giving them the information. Information is money to them. It's as good as them calling you up saying, "Hey, can I have $1,000?" Or it's the information will allow them to get $1 million off you. Whether the information from you allows them to sell your house, it allows them to transfer money from your lines of credit. Information is money.
Well, it's like we see it when people come to us and say, we think we have email accounts that have gotten hacked, because one of the most common things is you hack an email account and you can harvest so much information, like you have years of stuff, invoice numbers, banking details, customer, supplier, like all that sort of stuff.
You can change
information.
Info.
Yeah. So I just want to, there's been a bunch of questions, and please keep adding the questions to Q&A, but there's been a bunch of questions about how do we stop this? So I just wanted to transition into more the mitigation side. So and this is, we talk about this stuff a lot. The theory to start with, or the sort of operating principle that we believe really strongly everybody should be thinking about when it comes to technology, when it comes to your cybersecurity, if you're not being proactive, it's going to be way more expensive for you. And a lot of people think, well, subscribing to cybersecurity services, or paying a little bit extra, or putting in place two-factor authentication, that's expensive because of my time. I don't have time to authenticate or get a text message and this. But in reality, as we're talking, as I listen to Detective Coffee talk about different examples, the more we see, the more it just shows us how expensive it really is not to be proactive. Like you end up reacting to when stuff happens. And look, at worst, like you get sucked into the romance scams and send $4 million overseas, but there's the gift card stuff and all that sort of thing. So there are questions about like basic mitigation techniques for exploits and attacks. So we get these questions all the time about what are like the 1 or 2 or 3 things I should do. And here's the one thing that you should do. It's have a really strong cybersecurity process for your business. Have a proactive process, because there are a lot of things that you need to do to properly protect your business. You can't just protect your email. You also have to protect computers, right? You can't just protect computers. You also have to protect the firewall. You have to protect your Microsoft 365 accounts. There's a boatload of stuff that businesses need to do. And really it's changing on an ongoing basis, right? So the only way to do proper battle and protect yourself against the exploits out there is to have a proactive process that audits, reviews, and aligns things to cybersecurity best practices. So if somebody is looking at your systems, looking at your setup, comparing them to best practices and saying, hey, is the security of my Microsoft account, is it what I should have in place? Is everything turned on that should be turned on? Is my email security, is it strong enough that it's going to eliminate a whole bunch of that spam that's coming in? When the person at the front desk clicks on that link that they probably shouldn't click, is it going to prevent them from going to that website because we have extra security in place protecting our staff? Somebody asked a question about how do you educate staff? That's a best practice, right? How you put in place proper education that you can make sure you're test phishing your staff, that you're providing training for them, you're seeing who's doing the training, who's not doing the training. There's best practices for that you put in place. And when you run this sort of system that somebody at a very technical level is auditing, reviewing, and aligning to best practices, then it feeds up into a more executive type of advice saying, here are your risks, here are the vulnerabilities that you currently have, here's what we should do next quarter in order of priority. We need to eliminate this vulnerability, and you run that on a regular basis, and it creates a really strong cybersecurity roadmap. And then it allows us to month after month, quarter after quarter, continue to improve and reduce our risk of cybersecurity issues. Because I think, Detective Coffey, you probably agree, if you're not changing anything right now, are you staying the same in terms of your cybersecurity risk, or are you getting worse?
And I was thinking exactly that while you were saying that. These, especially sophisticated high-end cyber criminals, are always a step ahead of us. They're always a step ahead. They're always trying to figure out ways around the security constantly, because if they can't get into it, they don't make money. So they're constantly advancing, constantly using the latest technology. They're constantly using the most technology like artificial intelligence now, ChatGPT now. You can already see the difference in emails that, I don't know, I can anyway, the emails that are coming to us that are frauds, maybe as short a time ago as 6 months to a year ago, they looked bad. They looked, they had spelling mistakes. They had
text, spelling
they
mistakes.
were wrong. But
Names
now,
are weird.
with ChatGPT coming out, my God, I mean, people are writing War and Peace with just asking their computer to write it for them. And it's brilliant, and it's almost undetectable. So yeah, you have to continually work on your security. If you stop, you just keep falling farther and farther and farther behind.
All right, so I believe, like, I don't get an African prince telling me anymore that there's a bunch of money that millions of dollars for me. It seems to be a little bit more sophisticated than that, or a lot more sophisticated, to your point. Yeah. 3 key takeaways that we want everybody to walk away with today. 1, when something happens, report it right away. As Detective Coffey said, there is still a chance, if you report it right away, that the money can be recovered, and you can stop the money from being taken. You can freeze money in a bank account. You can, and then there's the greater good that the more the police force, the more the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre know about what's going on, the better that we can overall as a community deal with it and solve it. Number 2, without creating paranoia, create a zero trust framework in
Mhm.
terms of how you look at things, right? So that's that. You get an email coming in, you're like, I'm not sure I trust this. Let me verify it by going to the Bell site. And then verify it's true when you go to the Bell site. If you're going to trust things, you're going to click, and if you're going to click, you're going to get in trouble. So we want that zero trust framework. And then 3, as I just went in, that strong cybersecurity process and roadmap, that proactive process is key. So one of the questions that we had was, how do we determine if what our risk is right now? How do we determine where we have vulnerabilities? Well, it's funny enough that question gets asked because we have a cybersecurity risk assessment that we're offering. So anybody that's on this webinar, we appreciate folks coming on to our webinars, listening to what we have to say. We had a great audience today. And so what we're offering is a cybersecurity risk assessment where if you use your phone, you can, scan the QR code on this, and it'll take you to a form. Fill out the form, say, hey, I'm interested in a risk assessment. What we'll do is we'll take you through a process. It won't probably take you half an hour, 40 minutes total, including meeting with us and us taking you through the results. Where we have about 20 questions we can ask. We've been doing this for long enough that if we ask these 20 questions, we get a good sense of where a business is at in terms of their maturity and protecting against cybersecurity risks. So we can ask you those questions. They're not super technical, but they give us a sense of, you may have to ask your IT person. You might be able to answer them yourself, depending on your knowledge of your environment. Ask those, we hop on a call, and then we take you through, hey, here are the risks. Here's where you're exposing yourself to the greatest risk. Like maybe the greatest risk is ransomware. Maybe the greatest risk is business email compromise. Maybe it's just a malware risk. Maybe it's a user risk, that sort of thing. But we'll give you that sense. So at an executive level, you can look at it and say, okay, I understand what my risk is, because a lot of folks in the C-suite are getting told from their IT company or their IT guy, don't worry, we're fine. Everything's great. Well, we need a little bit more. We need a little bit more knowledge than that, and we need some more assurance in that, and preferably it comes before the insurance company says we won't insure you for cyber insurance because you don't have the kind of setup that you need. All right, so that's if you don't want to fill out that form, the other option is you can email Jermaine or I. If you have any questions, you can email us as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our Q&A pane here, and maybe we'll spend the next kind of 5 minutes or so. We'll go through any of the questions that we haven't answered here, Jermaine, or that we haven't answered. Jermaine, do you want to pick which one we should start with here?
Yeah, why don't we jump into the social media one? So Mariella was looking around. She wants to know, is stolen identity through social media common?
Yes. The simple answer.
The simple answer is yes.
Because again, I mean, you're talking WhatsApp things, WhatsApp, any message is yes. You don't click on the link.
Don't click on the link. I'd add to that too, set up two-factor authentication. So
Yeah.
WhatsApp, it's really easy, and Instagram too. I saw a boatload of people getting their Instagram accounts hacked, and it was simply because they didn't have two-factor authentication. And if I was a government regulator, I'm not much for government regulation, but here's where I think they could actually come into play and say, hey, understand all you folks want to use social media and stuff like that. If you're a company that's providing social media and this software, at minimum, you should force two-factor authentication.
Yeah, right.
It should not be an option where somebody that's a user gets to decide, yeah, I'm going to turn it on or I'm not going to turn it on. But based on now, everybody gets to decide, right? You want to turn on.
We know that effective.
Sorry, I just missed that. We might have had the
Uh,
robots or somebody somebody give a little blip to your
Yeah.
introduction there.
I was going to say, we know that two-factor authentication works because fraudsters are already trying to find ways around it. And the vulnerability around it is us, the users. So it's direct contact saying, hey, you've got this, can you click on this so we can get around? Like we know
Yeah.
it works.
Or you
So-
get so many requests for approvals throughout the day, instead of you looking to verify that
Right,
that's the right, the right account, or it is the same number on my screen, you just hit approve.
exactly.
Right? If you're not paranoid like I am, my two-factor, multi-factor authentication, even to get into my app, to get the code, to put it into my computer to log in, I have to put my fingerprint on it, right? So
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
extremely
We're
paranoid.
at the end of the
Doesn't have
day,
to be the same
we're
for
always
everybody.
like, yeah.
All right, maybe we'll do one or two more. So how could we determine if we're prepared for any potential attacks? I think the best way I think is we'll do a cyber risk assessment. It doesn't cost anything. We'll go through and do it for you. For those that are not familiar with our company, we do it as a way of introducing how we go about things. Our goal is to leave people smarter and fired up. That's why we do these sessions, these webinars. That's why we offer risk assessments and stuff like that. Jermaine, what else are you seeing here that we should?
I think we can we've got a couple here from Nadine that we can squish together. And the answer here, so one of them are QR codes notorious for being used by scammers. The answer is yes. There are tons of QR codes. If you go to a conference or a place where you haven't verified the information, or you're not talking to the people directly, etc., you should be hard pressed and think twice about scanning your QR codes, because it can arrest your camera, it can log in and take information or pull information from your phone, because you're essentially giving it access by scanning it and clicking on whatever link is there. So back to Detective Coffee's one thing: don't click the links, don't log into the QR scanner, the code, etc. And in terms of protecting against AI tools from accessing phone data, well, this is where it's the one statistic out there. If I can find two people that have ever read the end user license agreement of anything, any app or anything that they've installed on their phone, I would say the only way to prevent the AI from doing that is to read the EULA and come out at the end saying, well, you know what, I'm actually not going to sign on to that, or I'm not going to click it. But there's really no way, as long as you have given it access to your phone, you've downloaded it, you've installed it, you've put your thumbprint, it's going to have access to the data that it needs. And there's a few signs you can look out for sure. Your phone's running hot, your phone's slowing down, etc., etc. But a lot of the phone companies are also now monitoring to ensure that their chips in the system, etc., are supposed to be operating a certain way. And if they go outside of that, the security by the phone company or the carrier usually helps with that.
Yeah, and I think I just add to that one too, we're more and more, it used to be mobile device management, which is something through the Microsoft suite powered by Intune. That used to be hey, that's kind of nice to have, or that's really good for somebody that's in healthcare or somebody that has super sensitive information on a phone. Now, like from a best practices perspective, we're looking at it, that's like a must have, right? If people are having mobile phones managed centrally and making sure that there's security on those phones, that you're treating them like the computers. Like Detective Coffee, like what's the difference between a phone and a computer from an exploit perspective?
Nothing anymore. Our phones, they flew to the moon 60 years ago with an abacus, basically. So our phones are computers.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, that's a crazy one.
All right, maybe we do one last one about education, user education. And Detective Coffee, kind of throw in your opinion on this, but like obviously what we're doing today is we're trying to educate people as much as possible, and that's kind of the basis of anything. Educating executives, educating everybody that's using computers is super important, right?
100%. And that's become my main role in Toronto Police Financial Crimes, is getting out to different groups and speaking to seniors groups or high schools, church groups, and all that kind of stuff, because we know that prevention is key. You have to prevent the fraud, because once it's happened, once the money is gone, it's generally gone, sad to say. So the most effective weapon against fraud is educating the public, 100%.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think about educating based on, hey, could we subscribe to a tool that's going to educate our staff? And that will, and of course, that's a best practice. Like everybody should have within their company, they should have training that gets sent out every month, and there should be test phishing attacks and stuff like that. And somebody should be monitoring to see that staff do training. But we also say, like, it's a leadership responsibility, right? So people going out in the community in their church group, they're learning about this. An executive, when somebody comes on board, making sure that part of the initial training of staff is, hey, it's everybody's responsibility here to keep things safe and not to click links. And that ongoing dialogue, you can't just outsource it to an application to do kind of by itself and kind of leave it be, right?
Right. And the difficult thing about education and prevention is it's hard to measure. You can't measure frauds that don't happen. I'd like to think that programs such as this and getting out to groups has prevented more fraud that is occurring. And sometimes it's really hard to believe that because there's still so much occurring. So we have to maintain the educating and getting out to the communities and stuff like that. It's just really important. It's a mindset. It's constant vigilance. You know, it's just the world we live in, unfortunately.
Well, I'd like to just kind of wrap up on that note and just thank you, because I know for years and years, like, we do battle with all these cyber criminals, and sometimes it feels like on behalf of our client and us is like, is anybody else out there helping? And to hear about all this stuff that you and the Toronto Police Services and all the folks at the conference that you're at, whether it's the Secret Service, whether it's the RCMP, all the other folks that you're hanging out with there, to hear that there's so many people that are waging war against all these like slime balls out there that are doing this sort of stuff. It's really great to hear. So thank you on behalf of everybody.
All right, you're welcome. And yeah, we're out here. We're using the technology too. So
awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you again, Detective Coffee. Thanks, Jermaine. It's been great. Everybody have a wonderful day.
thank you.
I know.
Bye-bye.